Today, the United States dollar is the most heavily fortified currency on the face of the earth. It is considered impenetrable. For over 120 years, the US Treasury has developed and integrated 127 distinct security protocols to make this piece of paper impossible to forge. Try to counterfeit it, and the simplest scanning machine in the world will catch you immediately. It boasts a 70% unforgeable rating. Nations with endless resources have tried to replicate it and failed. But what if I told you that the greatest threat to the $45 trillion global financial market wasn't a hostile government? It wasn't a shadowy syndicate or a massive international organization. It was just one guy, a single man who challenged the most powerful financial and banking system in the world, and won. His story doesn't end in a hail of gunfire or a lifelong prison sentence. It ends with an unthinkable negotiation. This is the unbelievable true story of Frank Bourassa, the mastermind behind the largest counterfeiting operation in history. Before we can understand how Frank pulled this off, we have to understand what he was up against. The US dollar is a masterpiece of security engineering. First, you need to know that a dollar isn't actually paper, it's fabric. It is composed of 75% cotton and 25% linen. But that's just the foundation. Embedded inside those fibers is a three-dimensional watermark. There is a polymer security thread that glows vividly under ultraviolet light. The ink is color shifting. Tilt the bill, and the number 20 transforms from copper to green. There is microprinting so small you need a magnifying glass to see it, and raised intaglio printing that you can feel with your fingertips. Because of these layers, any slight error, a millimeter off in the printing, the wrong texture, a misaligned thread, means instant exposure. Thousands of attempts have failed. But Frank Bourassa realized something that every other counterfeiter completely missed. In November 2008, inside a small apartment on the outskirts of Montreal, Frank sat at his desk. For 47 consecutive days, he stared at a single $20 bill. He mapped the micro-printed letters around Andrew Jackson's collar. He measured the exact angle of the color-shifting ink. He calculated that the security thread was precisely 1.2 inches from the left edge. Most criminals assume the secret to printing money is the printer. Frank realized the real secret was the canvas. If you don't have the right paper, you are doomed before you even begin. There is only one company in the world that makes the paper for the US dollar, Crane Currency, located in Dalton, Massachusetts. They have been doing it since 1879. Their formula is a heavily guarded national secret, protected by a dedicated federal security apparatus. You can't just walk in and ask for a roll of paper. Simply asking would get you arrested on the spot. So, Frank looked elsewhere. He knew that central banks around the world use similar high-quality cotton linen blends. There are dozens of specialized paper mills in Europe that legally produce this material for government contracts. Frank just needed to convince one of them to sell it to him. Between December 2008 and January 2009, Frank created a ghost. He became Jackson Maxwell, the director of purchasing for Keystone Investment Limited. He built a professional website, set up a UK phone number, and crafted official letterheads. He contacted mills with a brilliant cover story. His company was issuing high-security corporate bonds and needed premium cotton paper with anti-counterfeiting features. The first 23 mills he contacted either hung up on him immediately or threatened to call the authorities. Anyone else would have given up. But Frank was abnormally patient. Finally, on February 3rd, 2009, a small Swiss mill called Artos agreed to open discussions. Frank was careful. He didn't ask for everything at once. First, he asked for the 75% cotton and 25% linen blend. Artos agreed. Days later, he requested a specific chemical treatment, one that coincidentally neutralized counterfeit detection pens. They agreed. Next, a custom watermark. They asked for the design. He sent them Andrew Jackson. They agreed. Then came the most audacious request of all. He asked for a polymer security thread woven into the paper, micro-printed with the text USA 20. He claimed it represented the denomination of the corporate bond. Astoundingly, Artos accepted the order. The watermark mold alone cost $35,000. Frank paid for the entire operation through a maze of shell companies. In January 2010, Frank received the message he had been waiting for. The paper was ready. He transferred $50,000 for the final shipment. It was enough paper to print $250 million. On January 7th, 2010, the shipment arrived at the port of Montreal. Frank stood on the roof of a parking garage 300 meters away, watching through binoculars. He was terrified. Canadian Customs had the right to randomly inspect any container. If an inspector cut the seal and held a single sheet to the light, they would see the face of Andrew Jackson staring back at them. The game would be over. Frank had spent days mapping the patrol routes of the customs officers and devising escape plans. But luck was on his side. The container passed through without inspection. Now, Frank needed a factory. He bought an isolated 40-acre farm outside Trois-Rivières using cash and a fake name. From the outside, it looked like a ruined barn. Inside, he spent $300,000 transforming it into a state-of-the-art printing facility. He purchased a used 6-ton Heidelberg offset printing press for $125,000. This was the exact type of machinery used by government mints. He installed industrial dryers, precision millimeter cutters, ultraviolet curing stations, and specialized color-shifting inks sourced from 3 different continents. But Frank didn't know how to run a commercial press, so he hired an expert, a master printer who had previously run a legal shop before doing time in prison. For 3 agonizing months, they failed. The colors bled, the alignment was off, the security thread slipped. Frank burned every single mistake to leave no evidence. Finally, in April 2010, the Heidelberg spat out the perfect $20 bill. It passed the UV test. It passed the iodine pen test. The colors shifted flawlessly. Between April and December 2010, Frank printed 12.5 million individual bills, $250 million. He stacked them inside 47 wooden crates. He had achieved the impossible. Now, he just had to sell it. Amateur counterfeiters get caught because they try to spend the money themselves at gas stations or restaurants. Cameras and serial numbers expose them in weeks. Frank was a professional. He became a wholesaler. He sold his currency in bulk to international organized crime syndicates for 30 cents on the dollar. He had strict rules. No bills were to be distributed in Canada or the Northeast United States. The money had to be washed in Europe and Asia, far away from advanced US detection systems. Between 2010 and 2012, Frank moved 50 millions of his fake dollars, walking away with a clean $15 million in real money, hidden securely in offshore accounts. He lived a quiet life. He had beaten the system. But in the criminal underworld, you are only as safe as the dumbest person in your supply chain. In March 2012, a bank teller in Las Vegas noticed something strange about a recent cash deposit. 11 $20 bills had the exact same serial number. Frank never repeated serial numbers, but one of the lower-level syndicate members had gotten greedy and tried to photocopy Frank's perfect bills using standard equipment. This idiot's mistake triggered the alarms. The United States Secret Service launched a massive investigation dubbed Operation Sunset. When they analyzed the flawless bills that the idiot had copied, they were stunned. The quality was so high they classified it as a supernote, a level of forgery usually reserved for hostile nation-states like North Korea. Shortly after, a drug bust near Montreal yielded more of the exact same supernotes. The Secret Service teamed up with the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, RCMP. They started squeezing low-level distributors, working their way up the chain. By late 2012, they knew a massive factory was operating in Quebec. They just didn't know exactly where or who was running it. On May 14, 2012, Frank arrived at a rented house to finalize his biggest single deal yet, $1 million in fake 20s for $300,000 in real cash. The buyer was supposedly an Ontario biker with European distribution connections. The buyer inspected the cash, nodded, and pulled out his phone. He said one word, "Confirm." The buyer was an undercover RCMP officer. Tactical teams breached the front and back doors simultaneously. Flashbangs detonated in the kitchen. Frank was pinned to the floor and handcuffed before he even realized what was happening. 40 minutes later, a second team raided the farm. They found the Heidelberg press, still warm from the morning's work. They found cutting machines, ink barrels, and roughly $3 million in ready-to-ship supernotes. Frank was staring down a 14-year sentence in Canada, but the Americans wanted him worse. Under US federal law, the sheer volume of the forgery meant he was facing up to 60 years in a supermax prison. His life was effectively over. But Frank knew something the authorities didn't. They had seized his farm, arrested 14 people across 3 countries, and dismantled his network, but they had only recovered a fraction of the money. More than $200 million in perfect supernotes were still hidden, and only Frank knew where they were. If those bills hit the market, they could severely damage global trust in the US currency. Frank possessed a weapon of mass financial destruction, and he was about to use it to extort the United States government. On New Year's Eve 2013, Frank sat down with the prosecution. His extradition hearing was a week away. His lawyer laid out an unthinkable offer. Frank would hand over the missing $200 million, the backup printing plates, and a second hidden press. In exchange, he wanted his freedom. The American prosecutor laughed, stating the US does not negotiate with criminals. But Frank calmly explained the reality. If he was sent to a US prison, his hidden partners would eventually find the stash and sell it to the highest bidder. The markets of Europe and Asia would be flooded with untraceable supernotes. The damage to the US economy would be catastrophic. It was the greatest bluff in criminal history, except it wasn't a bluff. The negotiations lasted 6 weeks. Ultimately, the threat to the dollar was too great. The United States capitulated. In January 2014, Frank led authorities to a rusted container parked behind an abandoned hotel. He cut the padlock. Inside, stacked from floor to ceiling, were cardboard boxes filled with perfectly wrapped bundles of 20s. It took 3 extra trucks and 4 hours to load the $200 million. 2 months later, Frank walked into a Montreal courthouse, paid a $1,300 fine in real cash, and walked out a completely free man. Today, Frank Bourassa has 0 criminal convictions on his record. In an incredible twist of irony, the man who nearly broke the US Treasury now runs a highly successful security consulting firm. He gets paid legitimate money to advise governments and corporations on how to stop counterfeiters just like him. The Secret Service spent years and millions of dollars trying to catch him, only to become his clients. To this day, it is estimated that nearly $50 million of Frank's flawless 20s are still in circulation, passing through our hands totally undetected. Frank Bourassa proved that with enough patience, intelligence, and audacity, even the most secure system in the world has a back door.